Oh my god. First, you breakable, welcome. I think that's honestly the first time that someone has ever said first in a live stream. So you're literally the first one ever to do that. Well, to be fair, been doing live streams on and off for quite a long time, so might have shitty memory. As far as I can remember, you're the first one. Okay, let me actually put some other music on. This as well. I feel honored. Hey Martin! Welcome back to another WIP Wednesday. It's time for your weekly dose of feedback. Good. I think we are. Yeah, we got like not as many people as last week, which is good. Last week was a bit hectic. Like basically just catching up with all the stuff that I didn't do for like the week before. So yeah. Seems to be more chill this time around. How is everyone in the chat doing? Everyone feeling good? Everyone had a nice day? I've been hearing a lot of people complaining about like how hot the weather is. Okay. Let's see, do we all save them? Apart from this one. Martijn is sending out emails for the first time to find internships. Good luck. Good luck with that, buddy. Keep, if there's like a couple bits of advice, keep sending out emails. Don't waver, even if you get ghosted or you get rejected for whatever reason. Keep it going. Because, yeah, this is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So, keep it up, keep searching for it, and I'm sure you're gonna find something. Best of luck. Cool. Okay, we're gonna get straight into it with the first one from A Sunny Day. I've risen from the dead with another project. Okay. Wanted to spice up a car render from a couple of years ago and turn it into a more applicable, small-scale environment piece for my portfolio. Nothing fancy. Okay. I'd like a few pointers on how to make the scene more lived in. So, more lived in. Any feedback on how I can do that without taking too much focus away from the main character? Car actor, sorry. Additional feedback on the camera angle and the lighting would also be appreciated. Okay, cool. So, let's see. So yeah, making it more lived in, right? Let's start with that one. Because I feel like you're kind of setting up a shot of... again, it's gonna come down to the same thing, like, as we always talk about, right? Like, the story. Like, what is the story behind this? It kind of looks like you're setting it up to be, like, an old car collection. Like, an old... What is it? Like, car magazine collection, rather. So, I'm imagining that we're now on the attic of, like, our grandpa. And we're stumbled upon this collection of, like, rare car magazines from, like, I don't know, 50 years ago, right? So how do you then convey that? Because the reason why I say so is because we got the old wooden planks, right? So what you could do is... So let's say if we were to go with that story, right? So, old collection. Let's say we go with that story. Then, what you could do just have like cardboard box with a label that says car magazines on it, and then the rest of it would just be like just way more magazines. I'm thinking it doesn't have to be a lot, right? I know that Megascans has like cardboard boxes, I think, so you can just add like a cardboard box here, maybe like the edge of one here as well, and then the rest of it would just be like literal more magazines, right? And you do the same thing here, maybe even have like a couple underneath this one as well, so that basically what I'm imagining is that you're looking at an open magazine that has like some sentimental value, right? So for you, it's this car. In the story of this picture, it might be the car that this person owned way back then, and it was like his favorite car or something like that, right? We don't have to do too much to convey that, because like the book opening by itself is enough. But just dressing it up with like a couple more magazines can be enough. And the way that you don't make it overwhelming is by shuffling them underneath it. And also probably thinking about the colors that are going to be on those magazines as well. So for example, we have like a really nice contrast with the background and the magazine pages itself. So the only thing that you would kind of need to avoid in this case is have a magazine cover that is white. And then you should be good. The reason why I say white is because the page itself is white as well, right? So you don't want anything too close, so that you still get the contrast of the overall scene that worked really well in the render that you had. Just making sure that it's also like a little bit more like lived in, or like a little bit more dressed up with like other magazines as well. Right, and this could be like this. The top of this magazine, of this box. Right? And that's like, I don't know, a decent way to kind of dress it up with more magazines. Damn it. My tablet is really dying on me. Is it possible to submit a project as well, or is this a member-only thing? Yes, this is a member-only thing, Martin. Thank you for asking. So more magazines. Maybe this becomes like a pile of magazines instead, right? Same as here, maybe like another pile, right? And then you could do same thing here. No, just really make it like a scene. And I think with a couple of simple assets, you could really make that work, right? With the assets that you already have, you'll probably have to make like a few more covers, or like get a few more covers, right? But that should be easy. Then one thing I noticed is you have the magazine here. There's a couple of small things that I kind of want to point out. Hey Grav, hey Nikori, welcome to the chat. How are you both doing? So the few things that I want to point out here is that the AO seems to be a little bit on the strong side. And then also, watch out where you put the text. Because if you think about it, like, magazines would never print anything on the fold of the page, because that becomes like really hard to read, right? So that's why I have this example here. Let me put that above my other layer. That's why I got this example here. I mean, can't really see it, right? But like, this is where the page splits So they have like a little offset on both sides to give people the room to read, right? So you'll probably just have to move the text just over here instead. I know that this is like super nitpicky. I don't know. I guess I'm just a little bit sensitive to this kind of stuff. But it is a really cool idea. I really like it, honestly. So yeah, great stuff. And again, like, I don't think this is like too much to make it like really feel lived in, right? You just need to spread around like a couple more magazines, and dress it up with like some cardboard boxes on like the edge, and then make it like a nice and cozy scene with just like a couple of assets. And that's it. That will get you there, Sonny. Thank you so much for asking the question. Then you also asked for like additional feedback on the camera angle and the lighting. I don't think there's too much wrong here, honestly. I don't think I would really change anything. Also because it's also a car render from like a couple of years ago. So probably don't want to spend like too much time in it. So yeah, that's why I'm sticking to like very simple stuff here. But I don't really have anything to say on the camera angle or the lighting, really. I think that's all good. All right, cool. Thank you so much for sharing your work, Sonny. And best of luck with this. It's a very interesting idea. And we're gonna move straight on to Tate. Let's have a look. Thank you for the feedback last week. Took your advice and tried to tell a better story as well as emphasize the work table. I think it looks much better. Yeah, I agree. I kind of scrambled the images a little bit, but this is the image that you showed off first. Oh. Like the bottom left image. You can clearly see that it's like really directing you towards the space on the left, right? Maybe a tad too much. The reason why it's probably too much is because you have a white light shining on a white banner, and it seems like the values are almost clipping. They might even be clipping, right? And with clipping, what we mean by that is that let's say you shine a light on a white area. Usually if you have like your full color spectrum, right? You can still see different highlights and different shades onto like on a white surface. But when it's clipping is that you're lighting it so much, or like you're doing the post-processing in such a way that it's actually pushing the values to be crunched on the high spectrum. So it's kind of gonna push the highlights that you would normally expect. It's gonna push them together with the mid values and something white. Long story short, this area looks a little bit too bright and a little bit too overly lit. And I think the same could potentially even apply for... I was about to say maybe the lights in general, both of them, right? Like both of the corners, maybe they are just a tad too bright. So maybe toning them down a little could help a lot. Just a little bit. In the end, it is your thing, right? So... Because also if you compare the two, I don't mind how this one looks in terms of like values compared to this one. Because we have just like the bright white that's being like hidden by like a light. But overall, I mean, your implementation and like the way that you restructured the scene looks way better than it does before. I love all these little touches where you're like, oh, little bit of character here, you know, that looks awesome. You have like the same happening here with like the little trophy. A little calendar here. Yeah, and the big banner looks really nice as well. Love it. Yep, great job. And this is really interesting, right? Because nothing fundamentally changed really about the scene. Like, it's just taking the components that were already there and just shuffling them around so that they're organized in a different way, right? But it looks completely different and it has a completely different feel and focus on like the important stuff that's actually happening in the scene. So this is awesome. Love to see it. Let's have a look at some of the other feedback requests. So this week I'm hoping to get some general feedback on the lighting and the color grading. If there's anything you think this environment needs, love to hear it. Yeah, I think the lighting, that's probably like the biggest thing that I would probably still tweak at this point. Also do like all the steps in the post-processing pipeline, right? Like maybe what you could do, I'll note some stuff here, right? So what you could do is export a screenshot and do an edit in Photoshop. And see how you can really quickly take this environment and kind of tweak it so where it looks like more what you want out of it, right? You could then also, this is like an additional step, this is more up to your preference, but you could then add all the edits that you've done in Photoshop into a color lookup table and then put that into Unreal so that it takes over the values that you've adjusted it to in Photoshop. So that could be a trick that you could try. But some of the other things are sharpening. I think you might already do that, but there's a post-process command that helps you sharpen things up. What is it like? If you type in sharpen, you're gonna see it. I think it's tone mapper or something like that that's in front of it. Just type in sharpener as your console command in Unreal, and that's gonna bring out some of that crunchiness. It's gonna look nice. Number 3, there's also a way to bring back screen space ambient occlusion in your environments, because sometimes in certain cases, at least in my environment, I've seen that it really brings back like some depth that is missing from Lumen. It kind of depends on which version that you run, but there are console commands for it. So I think what I'll just leave you with is enabling SSAO in whatever engine or like whatever engine version you're running it with. Right? So look that up and you're probably going to find a hit, and then there's probably going to be 2 commands in there. I'm running 5.1 at the moment, and for me it would be, oh god, I can't remember the first one, gotta be honest. Nah, I'm just gonna leave it there. Like, just look that up, and that's gonna bring back SSAO, and that's gonna give like a little bit of a boost in the AO. Can look really nice. What else do we have here? I honestly think... Oh, no. A vignette. A vignette is awesome because it will shift the focus towards the center of the frame. You can do that in post, like in Photoshop or whatever you do, or you can do that in Unreal as well. So what that could look like is... Let's do... Pretty sure that you know what a vignette is, but I'm going to give an example for other people here. Right, so I'm going to really quickly put a border around this thing. And then I'm going to blur that border. Let's say 150. And then what we'll do is I'll just mask that out. Oh, I see. The mask. I'm just gonna rasterize it. Through it. Nope. Right. So now we get to see the effect of it, right? The reason why I'm doing this is because you still have some highlights at the edges of your frame, which are quite distracting. So what I mean with those highlights is that this area, for example, is still quite bright and it's taken away from the focal point. But what it can actually, what this vignette actually does is it focuses the attention to the center of the frame. So you can see that this area is too bright now. And then if we put the vignette into place, it pushes it more towards the center. This is a really strong vignette, right? So feel free to play around with like the intensity of it. But it really forces you to look at like the nice highlights that you've put in your environment. So yeah, I highly recommend adding a vignette. So yeah, those are the 4 steps, like 4 quick steps that I can think of that are really going to make a difference. So I would definitely have a look at those. There's other small things, right? I mean, I think you're already doing it, like a little bit of chromatic aberration, a little bit of film grain, all that kind of stuff. And then also, last thing I'll add. Rendering in... Keep forgetting, 21:9? What this means is just you pick like a cinematic aspect ratio. So basically you're gonna have like a wider screen than you currently have. And that's about it. Those are like a couple of quick tips on how to improve like your post-processing in Unreal or other programs right before posting it. Just a handy little checklist. Tobias is also saying good improvements on that one. Well done. Yeah, I really like it. I like the focal points now, and it added like a whole bunch of character into it. I love it. So a great job, Tate. Well done. And I think, yeah, with the post-processing, you can score like a lot of easy points. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what you're gonna do with it. Good feedback, Tim. As always, thank you. You're welcome. Great job on the scene, man. Great job on the scene. Okay. And moving straight on. Oh, wait, no. Thank you so much for posting your work, Tate. Appreciate that. And I'll post the overpaint in the thread as always. And have a look at it. Okay. Next one is from Sammy. Thank you for the feedback. I tried to work on something like the size of the cables. I reduced the bigger ones. Yeah, they still feel really... Well, there's not as many of them. Well, apart from this section. In this section. This section feels still really busy. So I can see that you reduce them just a little bit. But what you could actually... I'll try a different approach, right? Like what you could actually do instead is... So let's say you keep like the really big one and then just surround it with like smaller ones. Right, so I'll sketch out what that could look like. So you have the big one. And there's like a smaller one. Another smaller one. Right, maybe... Yeah, what you could do is you could add like more of the smaller ones. But the reason why I'm so focused on those big ones is because they take up such a large space on your floor compared to like the rest of the floor, right? So what you would normally do is just in set dressing, like very generic explanation here, right? You would focus on large, right? Which is usually just like one or two assets. Very generic here, right? And then you got medium, and then you go to small. So what that would look like on just a random little small scene, right? As an example, instead of trying to have a big one, then another big one, and then another big one behind it, what you would do is you have like a big one, a medium one, maybe like another medium one behind it, and then like a bunch of small stuff. Right? That's like a very generic, a way to make something look like way more appealing. You can already kind of tell from this stupid little drawing, right? I'm not good at drawing, but like even just like a couple of boxes can really like sell the image of like, oh, you can make this look appealing, right? So that's like a very common technique used in level art, so that you have like your big item, your smaller items, and then or like your medium items, and then your small items next to it, right? I'll give... So like the thing here with the chair or like with the sofa, right? That's a great example of like you have one big blocky shape and then you have like a couple of medium shapes on top of it. Maybe next to it as well. And then you just have like some small rubble pieces that are just next to it and like on the sofa, maybe. Right, and like everything kind of gets reduced to like its volume, and with those like really interesting steps in the volume, you can make like really interesting compositions by using this sort of thinking, right? So that also applies to like cables or wires or anything like that, right? So the same could be applied here, where you say, cool, it's my big shape. Right, that's my big shape. Then you have the two plugs coming out of it. I go into this section. And in this case, what I would do is make these like tiny. And then have like a slimmer version of what you already have going on here. Right, so now we're doing large, small, and then medium. The reason why, because sometimes I swap them around because it makes more logical sense, right? Because you don't want this cable to be smaller because it's housing the other cables, right? So you still need to sell the realism and sometimes swap the elements around too. So yeah, that's why in this case we're doing it this way. And that's why I'm hammering on it so much, right? Like, for example, same thing here. Let's say these two, they come together in like a big tube, but that tube is open. And then you have like cables that are like loosely connecting to each other. Right? And then we're introducing like a lot of shape variation in terms of just the volumes that it's taking up. And you might say like, oh, why the hell like do you keep like mumbling about this stuff? But this stuff is like really crucial to selling the scale of the scene as well, right? That's kind of what we talked about last week as well. So all this stuff on the ground, like you can have the big cables there, right? But make them the least common cable out of all of them. And really, really play around with the scaling of things, right? Like make it super, super apparent that this is like, oh, like a loose cable here or something like that. Play around with the scales, right? Make it look like really nice. And also, while we're on this topic, right, as I'm looking at this specific cable, look at where things curve, right? Because you've got a curve in here, but the curve doesn't really make sense where it's attached to the wall, right? So you would probably expect like a little thingy that's attaching it to the wall. And like a little thing here as well that's attaching it to the wall again. Same here. Right? And the cool thing about that is, I know we're getting really into the weeds of things, right? But like the cool thing about that is that you can make it feel like the item that we're doing this to, in this case a cable, like it's really fastened into the environment, right? So it kind of is droopy here. So it kind of goes into like the ceiling somewhere. Can't see it, so we don't care. But then between these brackets, like it could be like really straight, because that's what the brackets are for. And then as soon as it's out of the bracket again, then it becomes loose again. Right, so you can really use these things as like a nice reinforcement mechanism of like, yeah, people have been like building and like screwing stuff into the wall just like nilly-willy, right? And these details, they make a lot of, they really sell that piece, right? They're really gonna bring it to like the next level. So with every cable, right, like this cable is resting on this little ledge. Pretty unrealistic, right? If the cable is going to be moving around, it's probably going to go straight down and then straight into the room with like a nice curve. But it's probably not going to bend in this way, right? It's too forced. It's too unrealistic. It kind of has like the stereotypical 3D look. Also, watch me talk about cables for 15 minutes long. Damn it. I mean, it is important, right? It is really important. You can really sell a scene with all this stuff. Same here, right? Like the cable coming out of this is probably not going to be boop, going this way. It's probably going to be bending somewhat down and then connecting Connecting with itself again. And the last thing that I'll say about, so we kind of talked about large, medium, and small shapes, right? So in terms of like set dressing and like level art, but also clustering. Clustering is very important too. I think we even talked about that last time, but clustering basically means that instead of having like a bunch of random shapes, right? Like it's just a bunch of random shapes. What you actually do is you kind of put them together, right? And then you have like another cluster here. This goes hand in hand with the large, medium, and small shapes, right? So the way that this applies to this scene is you kind of want to leave some areas of rest and kind of push like all the cables close to each other. So this cable would probably run straight down here and then would almost just meet up with this cable here. Right, so you push those cables together. You do the same thing with the big one as well. And then the big one can still come over here too, right? But then what is happening is that you have like a concentrated area, and then right next to it, you have an area that is there purely to create rest for the person looking at your scene. You're just like, ah, okay, nice. Because without rest, like nothing stands out, right? If everything is busy, like nothing is. So a good example of that would be here, right? This is a perfect example. Like you have like a big wall that is basically just like very minor details. So it acts like an area of rest. And then you have like a really nice prop in the middle of it. That there is like a nice balance there. I know we're keeping it super generic for this one, right? But I think there's a lot of benefit here. The last thing that I want to say is because you mentioned storytelling as well, right, Yuri? Let's have a look at that real quick. So the scene is an abandoned maintenance part of a building used by someone as their lair after it was a squat for some time. They also use it to make plants grow. So that's like a whole bunch of stuff, right? What I would do, again, kind of going into this whole conversation again, right? Like, let's actually, before we do, let's make sure that this is number 1, right? So shapes. Number 2, that was also number 1. Number 2 was the clustering, right? And then number 3 was, well, let's see. Let's use this scene for example. Detail versus rest. Right, so we have like a lot of stuff happening here, but the rest of the scene, or like at least the floor and like most of the wall, like everything seems to be concentrated here. Compared to the rest, right? Like in this case, like literal rest. Which is exactly what we're looking for in terms of like balance. So jumping back to the story that you want to convey, right? You kind of need to have that same sort of mentality when it comes to your storytelling as well. You're trying to potentially tell too much in one space, and I can probably say that you can easily leave out like the squatting area. Basically clean up the space a little bit and just make it a layer in like a maintenance part of a building. So what that would mean is that you just focus like all the props a little bit more on the actual living spaces, and then leave the hallways, like leave them a little bit more clean. So think about a big picture, right? How do we convey this? So let's say we have this hallway. Right, let me see what the layout is. And that's like staircase going down. And this is the area with the sofa. Right, and then we're looking into this door over here. I think, right? Yeah, so there's 2 doors. I know that I was going to say that it was going to be quick, but I think there's a lot of value in this. So we'll do a comparison, right? So the comparison is current, which is like you have the sofa here. There's like a little tarp on the floor. There's like cables going around. Let's see. There's like cables going around here. Obviously, we're only doing it top down, right? So it doesn't capture or convey like all the things. And then there is, so we've got this room, which has like the hydroponic basins in it. This one is actually pretty good in terms of layout and how clean it is. You'll see why visually as well. And then we've got the little, where's the door? The door is there. It's probably a little bit deeper. Still so confused why you can't just like merge them. So got like a door here, so that means that this is gonna be like the computer corner, right? With like the chair looking at that, and there's like another door here. I think there's like a bunch of cables going in here, right? So you're kind of seeing from the top down that this, some of it is good, but some of it can easily be cleaned up. So that's why, again, why I'm hammering so much on like the wires and the cabling on the floor, because it makes the space look like really busy without any need to, right? So you could still have, let me actually, let me actually be a little bit lazy here. So you could still have like cables, right? I'm not saying that you should get rid of the cables. Let's just call it future. I don't know. So most of these are quite good. Right, so you have a cable going here, cable going here. Right, and there's like some other stuff in this room as well. Doesn't matter too much. It's mainly the corridors that need a little bit of cleaning up. Right, so what you can do is just Really just push everything to the side. Right, and if you have a cable going down, just have it go down to the sides, or maybe, you know, just like a little bit like this happening. That's still fine, but now we're getting rest in these areas, right? So let me change that to a different color. So we changed this entire area to be more rest, right? Again, doesn't mean that you can't have a cable going this way or something like that, right? But it's way better than just having cables for the sake of cables, right? So yeah, and again, like I think actually these spaces are looking really nice, right? Because there's a lot of rest here. There's a lot of rest like on the floor. So I think those two are actually pretty good. It's just the main hallway, which really, especially this area, actually, just with the tarp probably, the tarp and the cable is probably like the biggest proponent. But you see what I'm saying, right? Like just making sure that you clean up the space a little bit, leave areas for rest, and then add details so that you can guide the player, right? Kind of deviated a little bit from the storytelling, right? But that's what I'm saying. Like instead of like squatting, right? Like maybe just have the sofa not there, and just make this like a corridor that has like your stereotypical things in a corridor, right? Like maybe there's like some trash here. Like a couple of trash bags. Maybe that they spilled out a little bit. Right, but keep it like very clean instead of like pretty busy. And then just move everything into the actual rooms where he's living, right? Long story short, I don't think there's a need for the squatting angle, because you're basically already building that into your hideout, right? I hope that helps. I think we hit like a bunch of really important topics here, like super relevant to anyone that was watching as well. So yeah, looking forward to how are you gonna do this, right? And I know that I go on a tangents a lot, but I actually like some of the areas that are really happening, right? Like this area, for example, I really like it. If you then add like the details on it, that area is gonna be like super nice. And if you then apply like this sort of thinking to like the rest of the areas and the rest of the zones, oh my god, the whole space is gonna look kick-ass, you know? So I'm looking forward to it. And thanks again for sharing your work, Yuri. Best of luck. Next one up. Matthew. It's finally happening. Let's have a look first. Sorry, I got like a message. Okay, that's an interesting thing. Okay. I'll sort that after the stream. Matthew, yo, let's go. Exactly. Let's go. Let me go back. Anyone had feedback or ideas on some cool presentation renders or just general critiques? I think honestly the renders that you have look freaking sick. So I'm probably not gonna say too much about it. I do want to bring up something awkward. And as you have like these nice renders, right? They're all the same aspect ratio. But then this one is vertical. And I brought this up with someone else, is that there's not really a good way to showcase vertical aspects on ArtStation. Because either what you do, right? Like what's going to happen on your ArtStation post is you're going to have something like this, right? And then you're going to have like a vertical one in there, and then like a horizontal one again. Right? And then you might have to scroll a little bit to view the whole thing. Because let's assume this is like full screen, right? You're probably going to have to scroll at least a little bit. However, the other option here is to full size the thing, where it's going to make it even more annoying because you have to scroll twice to see the whole thing. So, I mean, I just want to bring it up because it's freaking awkward. And I'm a real stickler for like this kind of stuff, right? Where it's like, oh, we're scrolling down and it goes from like, ooh, nice images, and then it kind of breaks apart and then you add like another image to it. I don't know. Maybe if you add it as the last one, right? Maybe that could work if you go full screen then. I don't really have a good answer for this one though. I just wanted to bring it up because I've always found it like really awkward. And I don't really have a good answer on how to present it. Yeah. It just makes it a little bit awkward. If it's no big deal to you, then completely ignore my tangent as well. Feel free to do so. However, the screenshots themselves look really nice though. I like the setup that you have going here. Looks freaking awesome. The clean render as well. I like it. Like it a lot. And this one as well. You're really good at like lighting your props, I gotta say. Like just the way that you handle the post-processing and the lighting. Really nice. Really nicely done. Now on to the breakdown. I like what I'm seeing here. I like that. Nice amount of optimization going on. The only thing... Man, there's like... hold up, let me see. Yeah, it's a bit of an experiment. I've enabled maximize width, so the width of the images shouldn't change in the final post. I wanted something similar to the weapon artist with the big old vertical. Oh yeah, if that's 100% what you're going for, do it, right? That's the thing that I was talking about, like the maximize width. Like I always just find it pretty awkward because you have to scroll multiple times, and if you want to see the whole thing, like you're gonna open it in a new tab. So I don't know. Still do it, right? Like don't let that stop you from doing it. It's not because one person finds it awkward that you shouldn't do it. That's all I'm trying to say. What was I going to say about this? Yeah, I don't know if this is a nitpick or not. But like you can easily optimize this more. But I also get where the geo comes from, right? And it's decently evenly spread out, because that's usually what you look for, right? That is sort of evenly spread out. For example, if I were to really nitpick, hold up, let me actually check. this small bump probably doesn't add too much to the overall silhouette. I kind of like that that it's not just like straight down, right? So I like that, but it probably doesn't need that much geometry to make that work. Right, so like 2 edges here. Let me see what you did. Yeah, you have like a whole bunch of edges, right? But you can probably make that work with like just 2. Again, this is a nitpick. I honestly, hear myself say it, I probably wouldn't worry about it too much. Next, we go from the raw scan to the clean scan to the final retopo. My main question here is, what are you showing? I think you mentioned something. I think you mentioned something that you couldn't get like the raw scan in because it was just too dense in terms of geometry, right? But that would make sense if we would have that visually, right? Where you have the raw scan, the cleaned up scan, and you can actually see the topology change between them. But now, I mean, it's not completely, right? But it kind of just looks like the same thing 3 times. If you know what I mean. Or maybe that's where... oh no, the last thing will be a GIF. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the only thing that I was like, I don't know what that is supposed to show. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the additional value here is. Apart from, well, if you were to overlay the wireframe, right? Then we see it change, that would be awesome. And then like the amount of scans, yep. Too straightforward, but I think that works really well. Honestly, I don't really have too much to say on this map. Like, this looks really nice, really clean. I love the UVs that you've done for it as well. Really nice and optimized. Looks like there's not too much space in there, which is really nice. Do we need to work with texel density on this prop? Yes. Everything. Everything ideally should have some sort of texel density, right? It depends on what you mean with texel density, because texel density can be different compared to a lot of different things, right? Like a texel density for like a top-down game is going to be completely different for a first-person game. So, yeah, this is probably going to be looking at the topology and looking at like it's a 4K texture as well. This is probably going to be for like first-person, very cinematic kind of purposes, right? Because it has to look good up close. But if you would make this for like a third-person game, then yeah, this is gonna go down to like 1K maybe, or well, let's say a 1K, and then possibly also like half or like 25% of like the total topology, maybe even more, depending on the game and art style and all that kind of stuff, right? Oh, okay. Sorry, Matt. One last nitpick. This presentation is awesome, but just give these props like a little bit more space on the borders. Like, make it sort of, it doesn't need to be perfect, right? But like, make it sort of align with this, right? So that you get like nice clean setup here. That would be awesome. This is like 40.96 text density. Yeah. Pixels per centimeter. Yep. It's probably gonna be close to it. But yeah, that's all I have to say about this problem. I know it's not too much, but that's a good thing, man. Like, freaking awesome job on cleaning this up and getting it out. And like I said before, like, you really nail your render. Like, your render style is fucking kick-ass. So keep doing what you're doing on that front, Matt. This is looking awesome. Sweet, and thanks again for posting your work as well. Looks great, says second favorite, and I do agree. It looks awesome. And then we move on to Maddie. Let's see. Where is the thread? Maddie. There he is. Been a while since the last update. I've been working on a trim sheet to help me texture some smaller parts of the scene. I plan to make another texture sheet that will include decals and just a few other trim textures, which will let me save texture space. Okay, interesting point there, Maddie. Straight from the bat. Don't, wherever you can, I mean, it's always a balancing act, right? But wherever you can, don't try to combine like decals with like another trim texture. Try to keep the trim textures separately. So what I would do in that case is just say, you would have like one additional trim, right? And then just one decal sheet for all your decals. Because the reason why we do this is because if you add something with opacity or with translucency, right, something with an alpha mask, we're actually adding a lot of complexity to our textures, and also it's going to require like a different shader anyway, right? So in that case, it's probably way simpler and way more clean to just say like, hey, look, this is going to be my trim, and this is going to be my decal sheet, and then your decal sheet is going to have an alpha, right? It's going to have like an alpha channel, because usually a very, very stereotypical way is to do base color plus your alpha, right? So that you can have like, well, base color plus your opacity map, I should say. So that this becomes one texture, right? Because you're packing the opacity in the alpha map, and you're doing the base color in the RGB map, in the RGB side, right? The difference here is if you have an alpha channel in your texture, you're gonna double the space that texture is gonna take in. So in that case, it's way better to have your trim as like a separate thing without an alpha map, and that makes that trim like cheaper to render. Plus, also way less confusing in setting it up as well. I like the way you're thinking though. Keep that in mind. I like where you're coming from because you're trying to optimize it and you're trying to save texture space. Keep that in mind because I love that you're doing that. And then you also mess around with easy fog and place them in the back of the scene. I did try to make the scene feel a little bit more lively, but right now I want to work on creating a better light pass and some more story elements. Maybe put a sleeping bag next to the barrel. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a weird area, right? Because you have this like pretty fancy like door. And then this is like a homeless fire going on, right? So we have like a contradiction there, but I don't know what to make of it necessarily, right? And this is where it gets like a little bit weird, because you're trying to infuse a story into something that has already been set up for you. So what I do like that you realize that something needs to be done, because I do agree. I just think that this is like a very tricky concept, and like a very, very, yeah, just a difficult concept, like storytelling wise, because it is a little bit all over the place. So I think, okay, so what do we think about this? If you want to focus on like, oh, this is under a bridge, stereotypical, but that's where you see a lot of homeless people, right? So let's kind of just focus on this angle instead. Which then means that this entrance is probably gonna be shut down, right? So we're kind of just gonna be boarding this section up. This is gonna be closed. Maybe it has like a sign on top of it that says like closed for business, blah blah blah. So that means that at this point, then the whole foreground kind of turns into our little area that is like run down, disheveled, and then we can kind of fill it up with props that make it look more like that. And that is also going to give us like an interesting contrast between the foreground, which is like this entire area, right? And then the background, which is still like people doing their daily thing. Like there are financial issues, right? Because I think some of the stores have shut down as well. But like stuff is still going on in the background. So you have this contradiction of, in the foreground, people living in squalor, and then in the background you have like a semi-thriving city that's still trying to get by. That's the way that I'm thinking about this. Because right now it would feel weird if let's say we're dressing this area up with like, let's say, a sleeping bag here, right? And then maybe there's like another sleeping bag from like another homeless guy next to it or whatever. And then you still have like this fancy door over to the left that is just, yeah, it's just there doing like its normal thing. I don't think that makes too much sense. So I think it would be either or. Like either we make it more fancy, right? And we kind of focus on the angle to the left, or we focus more on the homeless. And I think logically, right, if we're going with like very base logic, and also with the rest of the scene kind of also showcasing like more rundown parts, I think it makes more sense to go with the homeless angle rather than with the other angle. Right. Cool. Then we have some trim sheet stuff in here as well. But I don't think you want feedback on that yet. I think you're still working on that, so that's looking good. Yeah, I would say focus on like the homeless angle for the foreground more than anything else. Or if you have a better idea, totally applicable too, right? But that's like sort of the thing that kind of really came to me real quick. So feel free to change that if you have a better idea. But cool. And I think that's it, right? For you, Maddie. Some of the fog in the background, I like that you're building like a separation. I think also some atmospheric fog, like emphasizing that. Maybe there's like a lot of smog in the city, can help you give like a little bit more depth. Could be pretty cool as well. Hey, Andrea! Thank you for popping in. I hope you're doing well too. Thank you so much. I am doing great. I am having a lot of fun talking about art. I've honestly been doing a lot of art myself in the last couple of days. I've been really getting back into it, so I'm pumped up. Okay. Good luck, Maddie. I'm looking forward to the next update on this. And keep it up, buddy. Yeah. And then the last one. Technically, Fatal Muffin didn't really want to have some feedback today, but because it was, well, they were concerned about like me already having so many people on, but I forgot to untag a bunch of people, I think. So I'll make an exception, right? Because this scene looks so awesome. Let's see. So this is more just like a showcase rather than feedback. Maybe I'll go through what changed. I like what's happening in the back. Kind of like having something to look at. It's looking really nice. Great choice as well. Like that you have like a little pier, like showcasing like the seaside element. It's looking really nice. And I think you were thinking, oh, is there anything you've... Oh, there is a little bit of feedback. So is there anything you feel like the scene needs? You're thinking of making a cute little Vespa that we can kind of see on the left. Would be nice to put in the foreground on the left side. Oh, there are a couple more things. Okay, so first of all, what do you feel the scene needs? I think the Vespa is a great idea. It's also something that you could easily just change the color of, and it could look real nice. So let's say instead of making the base color red, you just make it like whitish, and then you do a color tint in the engine. And that gives you like a lot of freedom, because you could have like a blue, a yellow, a green one, and you could have like a couple of them like in certain places. And then you could go like the extra mile and maybe, this is such a cheeky thing. Maybe I don't think this fits actually. What I was gonna say is that you can do like a little plane on the top of it, add a bunch of geometry to it, and then simulate it to be draped over the scooter, and you kind of have like a nice little additional prop without having to do too much effort. It could be like just hidden in cloth. But yeah, like a nice little color change that could be nice. And then you were also thinking about giving the main buildings an identity, and I think that's a great shout. I don't think you need to do too much here, right? You just make like a little bistro here. And then, oh, you know, this would be fun. Maybe it's one of those things that I'm kind of hesitant to say because it might be so fun that it will just add like additional workload. Maybe what you could do is, let's see. Okay, no, let's change it up. So this could be the bistro, right? Like just a little, like nice terrace bistro kind of thing, like where you can just grab a drink. And then what if you turn this section into one of those stereotypical like seaside stores where they sell what is it, like pool noodles and like little swimming tubes and whatever, right? You could do like a whole bunch of like interesting looking props, just having like, I don't know what they're called in English, like swimming, I don't know, swimming helpers. Like inflatable little things, right? Like so fun to make them. And you could just have like a couple of those tubes like just hanging in front of the store. Like a couple of inflatables, maybe one with like a little horse head on top of it. I don't know. And then they usually also sell, don't want to go too overboard, right? I want to keep it to like the chunky stuff. Yeah, so maybe like a couple of pool noodles, maybe surf blanks. Could be interesting. I don't know. Something that sells like the stereotypical like seaside town supplies. You probably want to push, because I'm currently looking at like they're like right in front of each other, right? I think it would be interesting if you push like one further back, right? But you're probably already thinking about that. So the last thing that I will say is there is a thing here that kind of irks me a little bit, and it's that you have just this straight line, this straight, like super straight street just going until the end of the road, which looks pretty boring. You know, it's just a straight line going towards the coast. I think maybe thinking about a way where you can add like a little there's a couple of ways that you can do this, right? Like my favorite way would be to add like a little bit of a elevation. I like elevation changes. I'm biased towards them. You don't have to do them yourself. What you could do is, let's say we're looking top down. Let's say this is your street, and then this is like the little curve that you have in the road. Oh wait, actually more something like this, right? So that's the top-down version of your street right now. I think there's a couple of ways that you could change / improve this. Andrea is saying art is really addictive. Oh, it really is. Even so addictive that Starfield was done downloading, but I was like, I just want to be doing this. What you could do here is, let's see, make it like a little bit more dynamic, right? Where like the street kind of curves a little bit more. Obviously, you're already seeing what I'm doing here. This is going to have ramifications on your actual layout of the street itself. So probably not the most advised thing to do. Right, but that could be like an option where you could actually like move the street a little bit. The other option, and this is This is, again, I'm biased towards this, right? But let's zoom in a little bit. That's the building. What you could do is that this is a curve. There's a couple of ways that we could do this. This is the building, right? But you could have like a little staircase going up. Oh, we got a couple of new people coming in. Andrea Long, hey Tim, what do you think about recreating in 3D a 3D concept from portfolio, for portfolio purposes of a course? An SMG, for example. Yeah, nothing wrong with it. I think honestly, the best way to do it, if you want to create 3D, is take a concept and start from there. Like, honestly, like, that's the best way of doing it, because let's be real. If you want to become like a 3D environment artist or a 3D artist or whatever, your job is not going to be to, well, most likely, your job is not going to be coming up with the actual design, right? So, yeah, don't do it. Skip that step, because that's not why you're getting hired anyway. There are obviously edge cases, right, where like you're a concept designer and then you'll have to do 3D for the purposes of concept, but that's a little bit different. And generally not too widely applied to games, as far as I'm aware. Hey, Sunny Day! Only managed to hop in now. I saw you took a look at my piece already. I'll go through it later. Thanks for the feedback. Oh yeah, your piece is looking good. I think I'm really happy with the feedback that I gave. And I think we can make it look great, like just with like very simple tweaks. So I'm looking forward to how are you gonna deal with it. I saw that video with Dylan Abernathy as a guest. It was super great. I'm really going to follow this channel and watch everything. Oh, that's awesome, Cat Zero. Thank you so much. And yes, you will be able to see this after the video is ended. So yeah, now back to the feedback here, right? So we had like a little change in the road, but what you can also do is add like a little elevation change here. You can do that in multiple ways, right? You could also do an elevation change at the end of the street, which could also be pretty interesting. That would probably have like a less impact on the overall like a layout of the scene. But obviously you probably want to have something happening here rather than all the way in the back, because yeah, it's probably like this section that feels the worst, right? Because it's just straight. You need something to break that up. But yeah, that's all I got to say though. Street change, ding ding. Buildings are looking really nice. Okay, final thing. Small thing. Be careful with how intense you're making these decals. I think what I really like about the style that you've set forward, and like obviously inspired by Overwatch, is that it's usually not too, at least to my awareness, I haven't played Overwatch in ages, so don't take my word for it necessarily, but that they're not too intense with the amount of decals and the intensity of the decals on their surfaces. So that's what I would say about like these drips, for example. But yeah, I think that's a good way to end it. Thank you so much, Fatal Muffin, for posting your work. Even though you didn't necessarily wanted to get any feedback from it. Yeah. This is looking awesome though. I like it. I don't want to go off topic, but since you're active, how do you get into the industry if you're from the third world? Depends on where you're from. I worked with a bunch of people that are from places that don't really have like an active games industry, or they don't necessarily have like good jobs, right? It's weirdly enough, it's kind of the same as like any other place. It's make awesome work and show it to people. It's probably a little bit simplified, right? Because it's, I mean, it's obviously you're gonna run into different hurdles than I would do. For example, I lived in the EU, right? So I can freely travel to like other EU countries, which especially makes it really easy if I want to get a job in a different country. But that being said, I think that still, like, if you make good work and you share it with other people, you're actively applying, and the work is really good, you're gonna get an offer sooner or later. It might take a while. But yeah, I think everyone can get into this industry. I don't think there's... I mean, it's hard for me to say, right? I'll be honest about that. Because it's very dependent on where you're from as well. But yeah. But if you're not in the industry and the schools are so expensive, how do you get knowledge of the workflow? I mean, you're right here, right? And we're not the only platform. I would say that in terms of content and like just teaching yourself, like YouTube, right? I think the way that I would approach it is try to kind of figure out, it depends on your skill level, right? You got to start with the basics. Learn modeling, learn how to build shapes, learn a little bit of texturing, kind of go through like all the paces, and then try to figure out what you like the most and see what job like leans most toward those skills that you like doing the most. I know it's super generic, right? I'm trying to keep it super generic intentionally. I think the hardest thing is gonna be finding resources that are relevant to the games industry. Because there's a lot of good resources out there, but you kind of have to find them and be aware of certain workflow aspects. But that's details. Like, just start from the ground up. Blender's free, you can pick that up. YouTube is also free, right? Well, kind of. It depends on how easy it is for you to access the internet, I guess. Like, the knowledge is out there. Hey, I always inspiring. I try to do my best. One last thing. How do you know which field is for you? Animation, environment, or characters, etc. Yeah, you kind of have to do it. It's kind of a weird thing, right? But I'll give you an example from my life, right? I did have the benefit of going to like a university, right? And the university wasn't expensive by any means. at least in my country, right? I know that universities are ridiculously expensive in some other countries, but yeah, I was lucky there. But with that context, I went into university to become a concept artist because I was always drawing all the time. So I was like, cool, I just want to draw more and come up with designs and do all that stuff, right? But obviously, we're looking at a screen now and I'm not talking about concept art anymore, so something has changed. So what changed for me was in the first year, you kind of had to get in touch with everything, right? So it was concept art, it was programming, it was maths and all that kind of stuff. And from that moment on, I was like, oh, 3D modeling. I kind of like how this feels, and I can build worlds and I can kind of walk around in them. Well, not at that time because I wasn't using Unreal, but I could imagine me walking inside of them, right? Which is something that I could never do with concept art. I was like, oh my god, this is super interesting. So I then kind of, yeah, went just in a deep dive, you know, a deep dive into like environment art specifically, because I kind of, with my drawings, I was already kind of trying to tell, or like trying to build worlds. That's what I wanted to do. I didn't really care about like drawing characters. I didn't really care about all that. So yeah, I was kind of lucky in that way of already having a lot of 2D experience, which is generally like easier to iterate on. And I decided that, hey, characters not for me. So I kind of knew that that wasn't the thing. It's always like what interests you, but as an artist, everything does. I've been in the field as a freelancer for like 3 years. I can't decide. I love everything. So in that case, you still have to pick. You have to pick whatever. I know it's tough. It's gonna be tough. But in that case, you just have to pick whatever you like the most, or you think you like the most, until you don't. Because the truth of the matter is that a lot of the companies out there, like I'm talking specifically about the games industry, and most of my experience, like all of my experience, comes from like AAA developers, right? So take that into account whenever I say something. But most studios out there are looking for people that are specialized, or highly skilled generalist. So what that means is that you have one skill, one thing that you really shine in, and then the rest of it is kind of like additional icing on the cake, you know? So I kind of struggle with that myself as well, because even if you say environment art, it's still such a broad topic when you're looking for a job. But I wanted to do everything in environments. That's also not possible, right? So it goes even deeper than what you might think. Because in environment art, you have, yeah, you can focus on organics, you can focus on hard surface, you can focus on landscapes, you can focus on, look, there's like a whole bunch of, things there, right? That you can pick from. You just have to pick one and then kind of go with it. Because the other thing is, and Second Favorite brought it up as well, and thank you so much for sharing that, Second Favorite, is that you spend 3 years learning character art and then swapped when I realized I didn't care for it. Yeah. That might happen as well, right? But if it's the choice between, I mean, in this case, if it's the choice between sticking with the generalist path, right, and maybe getting a job, what would be a timeline? I'll give a... Timelines are always difficult to do, but let's say you stick with being a generalist, and it takes you 10 years to get into the industry, because at that point, finally, you've picked up a skill that people want to hire for, right? Or all your skills are good enough so that people can actually apply them. Or you could take a shortcut and focus on one skill get an industry job, and then generalize. It doesn't mean, like, specializing in a skill doesn't mean that you can't ever do that skill anymore, right? It's just once you're looking for employment, that's just the quickest way of getting into the industry. Do what you like until you don't. I get it. Thank you so much. Let's give it. Oh, thanks, I. On the plus side, now I can rig. Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many pluses. Like, the base knowledge that I have in coding, in scripting, in, well, maybe not physics. I guess that's, I don't know. I don't know where that comes in. But animation, character art, like, it gave me like a better understanding on how to, well, first interact with those disciplines, right? If someone's talking about like character art stuff, I can be like, okay, I can get the gist of it, rather than being like, I have no idea what that is. Oh yeah, we had VFX too. Yeah. I discovered your channel yesterday. When will you go live next and after that? So I go live every Wednesday and every Friday. So Friday I work on my own art, and then every Wednesday I do community feedback. However, I won't be here for Wednesday stream next week, but I will be here to work on art because we're traveling around. So let me quickly check. I think, yeah, next week Wednesday I'm not going to be available. Yep, but I should be here for the art part. So doing some art on Friday. Thank you so much for all the questions as well, Casiro. Yeah, thank you so much. It was perfectly timed because it was kind of at the end of all the feedback. And thank you so much for also like watching the workshops as well. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, that being said though, I'm gonna keep it here because I actually want to play a little bit of Starfield, you know? Thank you so much for being here all, and I'll see you on Friday, right? Or maybe in the next WIP Wednesday. We'll see each other soon. Thank you so much, people. Have a nice day, and we'll talk later. Oh no, wait, that's not my intro. Oh shit. Stay creative. Bye.